get married. I should have stayed a wizard, because then I would never be late. See what I did there? I like the fun. The fun. Yeah, because the wizard is never late. He arrives precisely when he means to. I should have stayed a wizard. I'm such a kidder. All right. Thank you guys for joining. We're going to have some fun today. I don't know if I should show you Chernobyl Stalker, the sequel. They're releasing a new game. If I should show it to you now, or we should wait for it till the end of the stream. What do you guys say? Should we watch the trailer for the new Chernobyl game now, or maybe later? It's up to you. You guys get to decide. And we got some interesting articles today. Some more funny, some more depressing. Be a wizard, work for Blizzard. No, from what I heard, like people at Blizzard, especially the people in charge, they get to pop their cherry. It's part of the Blizzard experience, so I've been told. People are saying later, and other people are saying let's go. Why do gamers say let's go when they're sitting on a chair the whole time? Hey Rosalhim, how's it going? Is it too quiet? I don't think it's too quiet. Everything is at max. What are you talking about? All right, later. We'll do it later then. Let's see. Oh, here we go. We got something very interesting to start it off. McDonald's has left Russia. By the way, do you guys remember 9gag? Do you know that it's kind of right-wing now, from what I can say? I mean, not right-wing as in promoting right-wing culture, but they're making fun of wokeness. It's one of the few websites on the internet that bizarrely makes fun of wokeness. Every single time I see an article trending on 9gag, it's making fun of progressive ideology. So I just found that to be interesting. Thank you for the 10 great British pounds, Severian Knox. I need to spend them right away because the inflation is then going to make them worthless. So, it is infiltrated. I don't know what went on. Like, I guess like the mods can never have stopped the funny on 9gag, but every time I go on this page, there's articles making fun of Karens, and there's articles making fun of progressive ideology. So yeah, this is the radicalization unlocked. I guess it's a small website, so this is why you don't see articles in the media making fun of it. I mean, this particular one talking about McDonald's got only 66 up dudes, 140%. Really? Why did they get so many downvotes? Thank you, Simon, but that fund will just keep growing because I'll never use it. All right, so why is McDonald's so important? I would say that McDonald's is more important than any other company because after the Soviet Union fell, McDonald's was one of the first Western corporations that opened its headquarters for the Russian market. So you could go to Moscow, and I remember seeing it on TV, like it was insane. Imagine like a 5-star Michelin restaurant opening up and everyone is lining up. The food was very expensive at the time for the Russian people. I mean, it was actually like eating at a very expensive restaurant. It happened in my country as well. I remember like the most expensive restaurant in my town was still cheaper than a McDonald's. I know it's probably baffling for the American brain, like what the fuck, but it's true. And on top of that, McDonald's actually tasted a lot better. McDonald's was in the USSR before, maybe under a different brand, because otherwise I don't see how, considering that you couldn't exchange rubles for dollars. Like you couldn't take Russian money out of Russia and use it in the United States. Elena Ceausescu, buy more shawarma. By the way, I'm happy to see vegan cultism starting to die where I live. Oh, that you poor thing, you like vegan cultism. I didn't even. I've never experienced it, so I don't know how it's like. But as food grows scarce, you're going to see more and more people, not caring about veganism anymore because it's an ideology of the rich. Anyway, going back to Russia. So, Pepsi had been there for a while. Dude, it's kind of difficult. I mean, there were some Western companies operating in Russia, but for example, Coca-Cola, when they did business with Russia, they got paid in warships. Was it Pepsi or Cola? I forgot, but it was one of the soft drinks. So they got paid in actual warships. They became world third strongest navy, I believe. So, right. McDonald's announced its exit from the Russian market in May, saying it would sell its 850 restaurants due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Man, this is such bullshit. Like, all the companies said, oh, it's due to the invasion of... The reason the companies left is due to the fact that it's now very difficult to convert rubles into dollars. Like, it's very, very difficult to do business with Russia. That's why companies left. It's not that they left because, oh my God, well, it's our morals and blah, blah, blah. No, it's profits. So, McDonald's did join one of the exodus of businesses, and now the Russians have restarted McDonald's because they bought the recipes, they bought the actual stores, and the only thing that changed is the name. So, what did they call themselves? Let's see, because they had an interesting name. Where is it? Vykusko and Tochka menu, but there's a translation from it. I really like the name they chose. I think it's called A Good Taste. No, simply A Good Taste. I think that's what it's called. So it's not McDonald's anymore. It's simply A Good Taste. And there are now people that are using the new badge from the Russian McDonald's as a collectible. So you have the people here showing that Russian history in two badges. I got the red badge in the 1990, the first day that Moscow McDonald's opened. Look at this. I queued 3 hours to get in. Can you imagine, like, waiting in line 3 hours for a McDonald's? Like, that's insane, right, when you think about it. But I completely understand it because we had one in my country, and it was also like a 3-hour queue when it opened. The other badge I got today when the Russian replacement for McDonald's opened. This is a piece of history, chat. Like, you can show this to your kids if you're in Russia. Thank you for the $20, JP. I'll take $20 by remorse. I really appreciate that. Thank you. So yeah, I found this to be interesting. Now, let's talk about the crime wave. Right? We got a crime wave happening in the United States of America. And this is in The Guardian. Now, I find it interesting that The Guardian actually uses the word "we" when talking about the U.S. because I thought The Guardian is a British paper. Are there Americans that actually read The Guardian is what I want to know. Like, are there people in the U.S. that unironically read The Guardian? Because I assume that an American would read CNN, they would read MSNBC, they would read Fox News. But are there Americans that actually, wake up in the morning and check to see what's on The Guardian? I'm waiting for the chat to catch up. So, I find it interesting because they talk with the word "we." When they say "we," they mean you, right? Okay, so apparently Karmas Camera says that yes. That's interesting, right? I really hate the whistle word "we." We. You can't afford to repeat the mistakes of the 90s. So, obviously, people remember that there was a crime wave in the U.S. During the 90s. And it was for the similar reasons that you have now, that they showed a lot of compassion to criminals. And they demoralized the police. They would push sensitivity training for the cops. And what ended up happening was a very high crime wave. So you can see this in the media because back then cancel culture wasn't a thing. You didn't have political correctness either. So there were certain comic books like The Punisher, but there were also movies like RoboCop, Dirty Harry. All of them involved into pretty much criminals getting blown up. And the American people loved it because they were fed up. Thank you for the donation of the $10. Ilana Ceausescu. As an American, I get my news from a Romanian. Okay. Well, I guess you get it from The Guardian as well. Now, it's not rocket science, okay? Like, there's two ways of handling with crime. Either you're soft on crime and you get more crime, or you're tough on crime and you get less crime. There's no in between. It's not rocket science. Now, there's another thing. The reason, the number one reason why criminals are being locked up is to separate them from the law-abiding citizens, right? Like, the people who commit crime get separated from the people that don't want crime committed upon them. Simple as. Now, the concept of reformation, it's like, okay, well, we need to have, like, the criminal being reformed. Like, that's nice if it happens. But the thing is, right? The thing is that the far left came to the conclusion that the prison system is broken because criminals can't be reformed, right? Now, it's not even the far right, but there are vigilantes, like the writer of The Punisher or the writer of RoboCop. Yeah, RoboCop not so much, but The Punisher, also goes with the concept that yes, criminals can't be reformed. Like I don't think I don't think that's a good starting point, is what I'm trying to say. So, in the past 2 years, warnings of pandemic-induced crime wave has been a staple of American evening news. All right, so I really love how they say it. Warnings of a pandemic-induced crime wave. The reason you have a crime wave is, number one, you demoralize the police, right? Number two, you open the prisons and allow the criminals to get out. I remember in the beginning of the pandemic, especially in California, they actually opened the prisons because they said, oh, well, there's a high risk of the pandemic spreading in the prison, so we're going to let people out. And at the same time, they locked people in. So it's like, you need to stay in your home. Don't go out. Social distance. Stay safe. But at the same time, they let prisoners out. Like, it makes absolutely no fucking sense. Like, you would think it's a lot easier to control the spread of a virus inside the prison than it is by letting people out. Like, if you want to go with social distancing and quarantining. Right? So this is the thing. Number one, demoralizing the police. Number two, passing legislation which encourage criminal behavior. For example, if you steal less than $1,000 worth of goods, it's a misdemeanor. Like, and they don't allow for the security guard at the mall, or they don't allow for a police officer to chase down a criminal. So what ended up happening is that you had, well, obviously, like, criminal elements which out and dumb, they realized, okay, but we can steal like $950 worth of goods, and we can do this from multiple stores several times a day, and we're not committing a crime. Technically, they can't follow us, so we're going to make a lot of money, which they did. And because of that, let me show you what happened. This is in LA, and when I saw it, like, I couldn't believe that this actually exists. Like, my Romanian brain just can't comprehend. Because, like, we have theft in our country, but, like, you don't have this. Every single item is being locked up. So if you want to buy something, like, you go to the supermarket, and if you want to buy something, you have to call someone to open this and give it to you, like it's a fucking iPhone or some shit. This is beyond bizarre. This is astonishing. I like, my brain can't compute that, like, people can live like this. And it's insulting, right? Like, if you're a law-abiding citizen and you go to the supermarket, it's almost like you're treated as a criminal. Like, they don't trust you. They don't trust you next to the merchandise. Next to the $5 merchandise. Don't forget gun control as a big cause of the crime wave. This was around the time a lot of states started restricting carrying pistols. Oh, we're going to talk about that in a bit as well. But I just seriously can't imagine seeing this in a store. And I'm a Romanian. I have to empathize that. Like, I am from a country where there is theft. But we don't have this. And it's not that we don't have the resources to do it, but it's so inconvenient. Like, imagine you go into a store and you have to wait for someone to unlock the $10 worth of goods that you want to buy. So anyway, you get. Let's recap, okay? Opening the prisons, allowing criminals to get out, demoralizing the police, making laws like if you steal less than $1,000 worth of goods, it's a misdemeanor. Forbidding police officer from chasing down criminals. Like, that's another law. If the criminal didn't steal more than $1,000, a police officer can't chase him down. And you have to think about it. It's like, okay, but how will the police officer know how much they stole? Obviously, the police officer is going to err on the side of caution and just not chase. Right? So it emboldens the criminal. There have been prosecutors that refuse to prosecute. I believe Ted Cruz was whining about it, because like there were prosecutors that literally said that they're not interested in prosecuting this type of crime, right? Like property theft and whatnot. So no wonder there's a crime rate that's going up. And on top of the fact that the economy is going down, obviously, you know, and then you also have the drug epidemic. Apparently, like, fentanyl is becoming a huge problem in the U.S. A lot more people die from it than they used to. So, you know, welcome to the Gulag Archipelago. Yeah, kinda. I mean, if you have a couple of people that want to get rich, impoverishing the population is the way to do it. Imagine that not only they didn't chase after criminals who stole less than $1,000, but it all spiked at a time where we all wear masks. Oh, obviously that probably helped, right? Because in 2019, if you put on a mask and you got into a store, like, everyone would have been suspicious of you. But now, like, you're not allowed to not have a mask. Like, if you go in a store without a mask, people were suspicious of you. So, apparently, a historic rise in homicide rates. So like, what we've been talking up until now is just theft and burglary. But there's also homicide rates. Frequent retail thefts and smash and grab robberies have refreshed paranoia about the wave of violence and property crime. My God, I love who wrote this. Like, you can clearly point that this person doesn't live in an affected neighborhood. So look at this. It's like, because of a pandemic-induced crime wave, because of a historic rise in homicide rates and reports of frequent retail thefts and smash and grab robberies, they refreshed the paranoia. What paranoia, man? It's not paranoia if it actually fucking happens. Like, paranoia, when you think they're out to get you, but they're not. Like, they're out to get someone else. And you're paranoid, okay? But, like, when the thing actually happens and you just said that it happens, it's not paranoia. It's you gaslighting. How rich are you that you can afford gas when it's $10 a gallon? How can you possibly do that? This author reminds me of the guy on Twitter during the riots, before and after the mob came to his gated community. Oh, yeah. Paranoia, the game Viri played. It's so bizarre. Like, he's literally saying that it never been this bad, and then he's like, well, people are paranoid about the wave of violence. Or property crime. I mean, no shit, dude. If I walk in a store and it looks like this, yeah, I'll be a little bit paranoid, not gonna lie. Jesus. It's a hate fact. Oh, I see. This isn't the first or even the second time the US has faced a moment of hysteria related to crime. Well, unfortunately, it's not the first or the second time where you have very progressive left-leaning politicians in charge. I do agree. Like, if you have crime-loving politicians, you're going to get crime. And people are calling for harsher punishments for perpetrators. I think, like, people are just calling for punishments for the perpetrators. Like, the law is actually there, but when you have a prosecutor that literally says they're not going to enforce property crime, then it doesn't matter how harsh the punishments are. Like, if they're not being enforced, you can just put them, like, 10,000 years in prison, like, next to Illidan Storm Rage. Nothing's gonna change. Javier Portolio Fernandez says, can't care about it. They voted for this. I'm ready for everything to come crashing down. I already lived through it in Central America anyway. Yeah, it's did you have the same thing in Central America where they're like people just politicians just allowing crime to happen? Sent you a PayPal super chat. Why, thank you, Trey. I'll check it out after the stream because I can't open my PayPal now and plug in the password and anything. But yeah, it's literally coming into a big city near you. The most recent public safety debate has drawn comparison to the late 80s and 90s when murders and crack cocaine epidemic were met with more arrests and longer sentences, especially for juveniles. While there are similarities, people today have benefited of hindsight to see how previous policies have affected the same communities where violence remains concentrated. And you have a professor at Yale University, Central for Racial Justice, and the author of Locking Up Our Own, a book about the response of black official prosecutors and judges in Washington, D.C. at the time. Yeah, of course, racial justice. Man, how about, like the racial justice, they say, oh, they're locking up more black people, so that's racist. Okay, how about, instead of saying we should lock up less black people, how about you say we need to lock up more white people as well? I would be fine with that. If they committed a crime, fine. Because at the end of the day, what's important is to not have the criminal on the street. That's what's important, to be able to mind your own business without being afraid of getting robbed. I wonder if this Yale University professor ever got mugged on the street. You shouldn't talk about crime unless you got mugged. Then the conversation would go in a very different way. Right? Like, they're not saying, like, they're arresting innocents. This is what I don't get. I just don't understand this mindset. And I see it on Twitter as well. Like, there was a viral video on Twitter where a guy goes in a convenience store, pulls out a gun, and tries to rob the store. And a bystander, which happened to carry, pulls out his gun and takes that guy out, right? So everyone was like, oh, well, that's good, like you saved the store owner. But there were like people with blue check marks and people with pronouns in the bio going, it's like, oh my God, but like, you don't understand. He's got a family at home. And it's like, yeah, so does the shopkeeper. Why are you siding with the criminal? You shouldn't have done that. Like, look, it's not that he's like pickpocketing someone, right? No, he threatened someone's life. Can you imagine what the shopkeeper feels like when he goes home after someone pulled a gun on him? And what did he do? Why does he deserve that? Why can't we talk about the victim? And you always have, it's like, oh, well, let's talk about the story of the criminal and blah, blah, blah. Why can't we talk about the story of the victim? I can't even begin to imagine how it's like to go to your minimum paid job and have someone draw a gun at you, right? And it's probably not the first time he does it. Like, he's going to do it again. Like, I don't know. Maybe if there are stories of people who had their comeuppance from doing that, you will prevent other people from doing it as well. Like, these stories, they go around, like, what happened to Bob? Oh, well, he tried to rob a convenience store. And, well, some guy in there, he had a weapon and took Bob out. Holy shit, well, I guess I'm not going to rob a convenience store then, am I? But it's like, this whole thing, right? Like, the cops aren't good. Because the cops are problematic, okay? People shouldn't defend themselves. Because defending yourself is problematic. Like, so what should people do? Just give away their earnings, their livelihoods, because someone pulls a gun on them? It's insane. More in prison. The prison population is big enough already. Apparently, they actually released people. So they released people before the pandemic. I don't know. Build more prisons then. I mean, like, what can you do? So while there are similarities, people today have the benefit of hindsight to see how previous policies have affected the same communities where violence remains concentrated. Of course, things have already been contested, but today there is more ammunition at people's disposal to contest new policies. We can look at the 80s and 90s and say, wait a minute, let's not do that again. Didn't the 80s and 90s actually fix the fucking problem? Like, when you go into the 2000s, a lot of places have become a lot safer. And it's only recently that they're becoming a lot more dangerous? So if anything, you should look at the 80s and 90s and say, let's fucking do that again. They released people, yeah. The Guardian spoke with Foreman about how this moment compares with decades past and how he sees black officials reckoning with the impact that tough on crime policies have had while also addressing a devastating increase in gun violence. This interview has been condensed and edited for clarity. Isn't it that most of these cities have strict gun laws as well? Like, you don't see this happening in red states. There's not like a huge crime wave happening in places where people are able to carry guns. And it's just like major cities, right? Like, you don't see this happening in small town America. Why not? Why can't we ask the question? Yeah, 80s was worse. 90s was hell of a dangerous year. How would you compare the rhetoric and backlash to crime that happened in the late 20th century? What's going on to... I love it, you know? So you have like a huge increase in crime, and what they're concerned about is the rhetoric. It's like, yeah, but like, how do the people who get mugged talk about the mugging, you know? Like, that's their major concern. It's beyond fucking comical at this point. There's a mugging going on. Okay, let's ask the person getting mugged, how does he talk about it? Does he show compassion to the mugger? No? Well, he's a problem, clearly. Civilian Knox, we should build enclaves for criminals and bleeding hearts. We just need to be sure the walls are high enough. Wasn't that like the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone? And we know how that ended up. I want them to bring in RoboCop for Chicago. Man, at least if they can bring a TV show that's good like RoboCop used to be. Like, today they're afraid to even tackle this subject in a movie or a TV show or a comic book, because if they do, they will be immediately canceled. What's going on today doesn't really compare in volume or ferocity to the sustainedness of what we saw in the 1980s and 90s. Well, yeah, but it's going there. I mean, the graph is going up. Unless you can explain why do you think at one point it will just stop. All indications are that it's keeping going up and up and up. At that time, you had open-air drug markets that carried an air of violence and often real violence with them. African-American leaders would say that crack was the worst thing that hit us since slavery. You had elected officials calling for the National Guard to be deployed. Oh yeah, this is another thing that the left doesn't really mention, but the reason they were so hard and tough on crime, especially for marijuana, is because the community leaders from the African-American communities, they're the ones that insisted for this. And they did it because it was so fucking bad. Like, it's being described here by a university professor at Yale for racial justice. And he was saying, like, oh yeah, we had, like, open-air drug markets. I mean, that's beyond fucked up. The other thing is crucially different is that both nationally and in the black community in particular, we now have an understanding of what was the punitive overreaction which caused university and law students and college students and many of them to read books like The New Jim Crow or Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson, blah, blah, blah. What happened in the 80s and the 90s and with a generation of people that has been raised to believe that it was a terrible overreaction. I don't know if it was a terrible overreaction. It fixed the fucking problem, didn't it? Now, here's the thing that leftists do, right? And I mentioned this before. So they will say, okay, well, there's more black people being arrested, and therefore that's racist, so the solution is to arrest less black people. No, like, the solution should be arrest more white people. Like, anyone that commits a crime should be in prison. Get them off the streets. Any law-abiding citizen doesn't want to deal with that shit. You can't operate a business in a high-crime environment. Like, if it impoverishes neighborhoods. That's why you have poverty. That's why there's high prices in these neighborhoods. It's because if someone opens a business there and has his stuff stolen, then he needs to spend more money for insurance. He needs to spend more money for security. You know, he needs to spend more money to cover his losses. And then all of the stores, they look like this. With everything locked up. Like it's a fucking prison. And everything is more expensive. And it hurts the actual community. It hurts the people living there. When it comes to law enforcement and conservatives, are you seeing any difference or comparisons with the reactions from the past? When it comes to those voices and larger national politics, the story is really more of a continuity than it was of divergence. On one hand, you have some black officials who are speaking about this from what I could call a place of authenticity and one of real and true concern. They're both moved by the suffering that they see. But of course, at the same time, there are people who are opportunistic. There are commentators and news outlets and people like Trump who have been willing to use crime and racialized fears of crime to motivate a set of voters and tell people, listen, you should be scared. Because when you tell people that they're scared, you can say, and you should trust me to protect you. Oh my fucking God, you just described the pandemic, didn't you? You just fucking described the COVID pandemic to a T. Like, listen to this professor of racial justice here. Like, listen to this paragraph, okay? When you tell people they should be scared, the next thing you can tell people is that you should trust me to protect you. And I remember the TV going nonstop about how many deaths, how many cases, how many, social distance and wear a mask and blah, 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 blah. Like nonstop, 24/7 coverage. Every channel, all the channels. But I also like the fact that he can actually connect at an empathetic level with the people. Like he can say, oh yeah, well, there are people that are legitimately concerned by crime. But then there are the opportunists and blah, blah, blah. Like, yes, politicians are opportunists. Every single politician does this. Like, they look at what the people want and they give them what they want so they will vote for them. I mean, I don't know if Donald Trump really cares about what happens in the impoverished areas of the U.S., but, like, if there are people there that are saying, hey, we want the crime to stop. If you help us, we'll vote for you. Of course he's going to do that. He's going to be like, okay, well, I'm going to give you law and order if you vote for me. Duh! Like... The Gaff. RoboCop also showed the corporations fomenting crime and profiting off of it. Mainly buying up reduced property value, and sure, that wouldn't show what's happening today. Yeah, I mean, the big corporations can profit from crime because, as you mentioned, there's cheap property. And it's not just big corporation, but politicians as well. Wasn't there like a mayor? I believe it was in New York. He was constantly buying up property after he forcefully shut down businesses during the pandemic, and then they were going bankrupt, so he could just buy as much as he wanted. I'm pretty sure he can sell them now, and he can sell them better. Ed 209, my God, I really love Ed 209. I think he's like one of the coolest sci-fi robots ever made. I don't know what about the design of Ed is so freaking amazing. Let me hold on. The only problem with Ed is that they really nerfed him in RoboCop 3, like a little girl could hack him. And he actually, I guess, like, he got killed by a flight of stairs. But realistically speaking, RoboCop should have absolutely no fucking chance against this. Like, there is no way RoboCop could win. Like, unless he's got, like, a rocket launcher or something. I mean, look at this beast. He's got rockets coming up from here. He's got, these twin machine guns. He's got targeting arrays. Like, oh my God. And when it comes in black, it looks even fucking cooler. I really love the robot from the RoboCop remake. I don't know why people didn't like the RoboCop remake, but it had Ed going around in the Middle East. It's like, Assalamu alaikum, return to your homes. It was so fucking cool. And then you have like some Middle Eastern kid assaulting Ed with a knife, and he ended up on the news, and everyone was saying what a tragedy, and I was like, well, I guess that's true. Do you think we will see the Pinkertons again? Nah. The FBI dominates the Pinkertons. Man, the Pinkertons are such an interesting part of American history. Like, it really shows why private police can't work. Because you have a lot of people from Ancapistan going, it's like, oh, we can have private police. So, a lot of banditos in the United States back in the Wild West days, They would commit a crime, and then they would go to another state. And obviously the police couldn't follow. So you then have the Pinkertons, which was a private company, and they would be able to follow people cross state lines. It's kind of like the beginning of the Fed, if you will. Now, why this is interesting is that they always found the person that they were charged to find guilty, right? So like, I would, let's say, pay the Pinkertons to investigate my neighbor for committing a crime, and the Pinkertons would just happen to find that my neighbor was guilty. Why? Well, because I paid them. So it's across state lines. Back then, across state lines was actually a deal. But it's interesting because they had 100% conviction rate. Nothing is getting better. Gas has doubled. Prices are up 10-20%. Oh, it's going to get worse. I mean, I'm genuinely curious, like, the people who support for Joe Biden, like, what exactly are they happy with what he accomplished? I think, like, maybe if you're, like, a climate cultist or a person that only cares about ideology, like, maybe if you're genuinely gay and you're afraid that the right-wingers are going to get you, or if you're a woman who had an abortion and, you don't want abortions to be made illegal, like, I'm really trying to figure, like, who are the voting base, right? Because, like, people that just have a family and they just want to have an average lifestyle, that they're really affected by this shit, right? Like, the gas going up and everything becoming 10-20% more expensive. Science is capitalist. Oh, we don't mention that on this channel. All right, let's get back to reading the article. Maybe we can actually finish an article before ending the stream. So, how do you see established and emerging black leaders navigating this moment? I think we're seeing more of a mixed narrative than in the 80s and 90s, when it's almost exclusively a turn for the punitive and making police more aggressive. Then black leaders opted to ramp up pretextual stops, try more young people as adults, and adopt mandatory minimums. What I love the fact is that he not once mentions that anyone was arrested while being innocent. Because he would have a point if he would say, yeah, well, there were a lot of innocent people convicted. And I would have been, okay, well, that's fucked up. But, like, he's not saying that. What he is saying is that, well, the punishment was too harsh. Don't do the fucking crime then. The number 3, thank you for the $5. How long do you think until the big collapse? I give it 20 years. I don't know what you understand by collapse. Like, define collapse. Like, there's no more government? Like, food riots? Like, what would it take? Like, what would you say? All right, well, this is now collapsing. I'm not kidding. Like, define collapse. I'm not even being pedantic or, like, just tell me what you understand by that concept. To what extent do judges and district attorneys have different tools and alternatives? Okay, so there are district attorneys that literally didn't enforce the law. Like, they would actually claim they're not interested in enforcing the law. Okay, so anarchy. Well, anarchy would mean that the government doesn't function anymore. I don't think that's going to happen in the United States. Out of control inflation. I wouldn't call that a collapse. Like, you still have a functioning society even with out of control inflation. People just start trading with other things. Famine. No, I mean, there are places that experience famine, but they weren't a collapse. Like, economic collapse. Yeah, but, like, the US did have inflation in the past. I think you even had the $10,000 bill, if I look it up. Okay, the Great Depression in the United States, was that a collapse? Because, like, America came back from the Great Depression. It didn't need a world war for it to do it, but it did come back. Anyway, in every jurisdiction, there's going to be some alternative programs that's available to a judge and a district attorney. There's going to be some drug treatment program. Okay, so drug treatment program. This might actually work, but you can't do it in the US. So let me tell you something about the drug treatment program in Afghanistan, because I actually read about it and I found it fascinating. So the Taliban, they went into Afghanistan after the US left, and they found a lot of people that were addicts. Now, I'm not going to say that the US brought in la cocaína, but definitely they weren't very good at making sure that la cocaína stays off the streets. So, a lot of people in Afghanistan were addicted to la cocaína. So what did the Taliban do? They literally took them off the streets and locked them up in facilities until they got clean. So they went through the withdrawal, they tied them to a bed, they went through the withdrawal, and after that they went out as functioning citizens. I don't think you can do that in the US. Like, if you try doing that in the US, it's a human rights violation. Like, if you take a junkie off the street and you lock him up in a facility and you tie him to a bed, like, that is definitely a big no-no. It happened with Jordan Peterson. Now, of course, he's in Canada, but it's the same thing. So Jordan Peterson gets addicted to benzodiazepines because the doctors prescribe them. And he gets addicted to them. He's having really nasty side effects. And the only way he managed to get himself cleaned up is by going to Eastern Europe, where, do you know what they did to him? They tied him to a bed. That's the Eastern European treatment. They tied him to a bed. He got through withdrawals. You can't do that in the US. Violating human rights and whatnot. That's legal in the US? No, I don't think it's legal. I think it's deprivation of liberty. Like, you're depriving the person of his freedoms. You're not allowed to do that. Didn't they also shut down the mental asylums in the US? Or is like, in the US, you don't consider drug addiction to be a mental issue? Lock up junkies, no smartphone or CNN for you. Get them off social media. No. But even then, like, I am willing to tell you that if you, like if it's legal in the US, all it would take is a couple of CNN episodes, and people are going to be livid against it. The reason is also that you're taking away the person's dignity, right? Like, when you tie someone to a bed, like they're an animal, you take away their dignity. But I can tell you, I have seen what drugs do to people. If I was addicted and that was the only treatment available, tie me the fuck up. You can use this video as my consent in the future. I never did drugs, but like, if 10 or 20 years from now I start, feel free to tie me to the bed until it passes. Don't you sign away freedoms in any mental or rehab institution? Well, the thing is, like, the Taliban didn't ask you to sign away anything. They would just take people that were addicted off the streets and lock them up until they were clean. Right? So it is a violation. You can't do that in the US. Boogie, thank you for the $25. Greetings from Louisiana. Ooh, the South. It wasn't consensual with apple strudel. That's the thing, it's not consensual. There are still mental health facilities, but they are closed all the sanitariums. The hospital's literally designed architecturally to be constructive to mental health. Oh, I see. Thank you, Real Holzdater, for $10. Greetings, V. Best wishes for you and words. Thank you. So the thing with the mental health institutions, the reason they were closed, I think, is because in the Soviet Union, they actually used the punitive psychiatry. I don't know if this was used in the US, but it was a way to bypass a judge sentencing someone, right? So you could basically lock someone up without a trial, and then it was up to the doctors when the person is released. It was up to the doctors if the person gets visitation. This was done in the Soviet Union to a lot of dissidents that were too uncomfortable to trial. So I guess, like, in the US, they looked at the Soviet Union and they must have said, all right, well, we don't want that shit here. So I can see the benefits and I can see the negativity of shutting these things down. So he goes out and he says that none of the programs are available in prison. Like, motherfucker, if the prisons actually work properly, right? If the American prisons actually didn't have drugs in them, there. And by the way, let me tell you something. There is no fucking way you can have drugs in a prison unless the guards are in on it. All right? Like, unless the guards are in on it, you cannot have drugs in a prison without the consent of the guards. So if you had no drugs in the prisons and you take an addict and you sentence him for like 5 years, he's going to come out clean. Because there's no way for him to get his fixed. But because the prisons are fucking corrupt and the institutions are corrupt, yeah, like people can even go in clean and come out being addicted. There is no pill that cures stupid. Do you think that doctors are pressured into overprescribing meds? Would you do a video on your opinion on this? It depends. It depends on the country. Depends on the doctors. The pharmaceutical companies can give special perks to doctors. It's not that they're being paid, but like if there's a pharmaceutical, let me. Okay, fine. I'll say something that maybe I shouldn't, but being a doctor is a very intensive and stressful work. You can be on call, for example, which means you start your shift at around 7 a.m. and you go home the next day at 4 p.m. and then you're on call again the next day at 7, right? So in order to understand just how difficult it is to be as a doctor, I will tell you a story where a journalist followed the doctor that was on call and he couldn't manage to complete the doctor's shift, right? Like the journalist, all he had to do was to record. But it was so intensive and so difficult that he gave up during the middle of it. So with that in mind, like understanding how overworked and stressed a lot of doctors are, they want to have as much free time as possible whenever they get it. So one of the way you can have free time as a doctor is to use your vacation days. But another way is to go to a medical symposium. So, for example, a medical symposium that happens in Venice, you take a plane, you fly all the way to Venice, and you stay there for 2 days, right? You go to the symposium, and after that, you can go and visit Venice. And this is what a lot of doctors do. They just go around and they go to these various congresses around the world. And this is a business expense, right? Like the hospital pays for it. And the hospital deducts the money that they paid for it from the pharmaceutical companies. So a pharmaceutical company can actually say, all right, well, we are hosting this symposium in Italy. Would you like to join, right? So you join, and the pharmaceutical company usually selects the doctors that they pay for, to go to Italy. And it's heavily implied that you should push that product, right? It's heavily implied that if you want to go there next year, you should push those particular pills. So you're not really getting a bribe, but you kind of are, right? Like it's not that the company gives you money in the pocket, but it does provide certain services. Do doctors not sleep? Well, the thing is, you do have a bed at the hospital. And it depends on how busy the night is. Like sometimes you can sleep because there's no patients coming in during the night. Other times there can be emergencies and you don't sleep at all. Organizing symposiums used to be challenging. The doctors used to book out places except at the cheapest times of the year. Yeah, I mean, most of the symposiums are organized by companies and they pay for it. And then there's, like literally the company can just approach the doctor and they can find a way to make things work. Depends on the country, as I mentioned. Like the game journals. Exactly like the game journals. So I remember there was Guitar Hero 3. Flew the Kotaku team, if I remember correctly, or the Polygon team. Flew them all the way to France where they wined and dined them so they can play their new game. Right? Like, there's no reason why they couldn't have sent a beta version of the game to Polygon so they can try it out. Right? There was no reason to fly them all the way to France. But the reason they did it is to let the journalists know that they're expected. They should give a good review if they want to fly there again when the next game is coming out. yeah, the Duke Nukem movie is confirmed, and it's going to be a really great movie. It's the same people that wrote Cobra Kai are the ones that are going to write Duke Nukem, so I actually have high expectations for it. Inmates sneak mice and birds in from the recreation yard. I do agree that there are a lot of ways that inmates manage to sneak in various drugs into the prison. However, with that said, the guards know about it. I mean, you have cameras everywhere. Alright, like there's guards at every corner. That the only way you can have drugs in a prison if is if the guards allow it to happen. So anyway, the problem is that none of these programs are available as prisons, so they exist everywhere, but they exist in small numbers, with restrictions on who can participate, with limited bed space. Well, yeah, because these programs were made in a time where you didn't have a drug epidemic. So now the politicians ignored the problem until it's so huge that the number of beds and facilities aren't enough to cover. I'd like to lock this young man up, but I can't because there's no bed space in the prison. That's not a sentence that's ever come out of any judge's mouth as far as I know. Actually, there are situations where the prisons are so filled that before a pandemic, the politicians can open the doors to the prison and allow inmates to get out. But no, like there is situations where the judges know that the prisons are filled, so they're going to try to give an easier sentence. I mean, I don't know if it's happening in the US, but it does happen in my country. So either this guy is lying or he is misinformed. But for example, if a judge knows that the prisons are quite filled during that time of year, they can give probation, they can try to look the other way if the sentence isn't that dangerous. I mean, there are, and it comes down from the top, right? Like, the mayor usually will tell the judges, it's like, okay, the prisons are kind of filled, so can we do something about it? Like, please don't sentence unless it's a serious crime. Like, it does happen. I would ask Nick Richietta when I'm going to see him how it's like in the United States. Obviously, he's a lawyer, not a judge. But this is not common knowledge, right? Like, you don't even want this to be common knowledge. Like, imagine if the criminals were to know, hey, the prisons are filled to the max, and the judges are more lenient this couple of months. Like, let's do more crime. Like, that's not something you want the public to know. But in reality, yeah, like, the amount of empty bed spaces in the prisons are a problem. You can't lock up the whole population. And even then, you have, like, politicians that sometimes, like, this happened in Romania recently. They can issue a pardon for, like, people that have, let's say, only 1 year left to serve. Or only 2 years left to serve. The judge can be like, all right, well, because the prisons are overcrowded, we're going to pardon these people. Like, this can happen. You can give amnesty. In fact, it's done quite often. So anyway, right. I guess this is the interview. I found it to be absolutely interesting because it shows the mindset of the progressives. That they're more concerned with not being too harsh on crime, and because of that, you get high crime. But what I do find interesting is that not at a single point do they say, oh, well, innocent people are being locked up. Oh, that's not okay. The only thing that they're concerned is that black people are being locked up. Which is like, okay, fine, lock up more white people to compensate then. If that's the problem. Because at the end of the day, just get the criminals off the streets. That's what people care about. Anyway, I should read Dante's Inferno. Dude, I don't have time to read. What I can do, however, is I can watch The Stalker 2.0. So let's look at the Stalker 2 trailer, which came out. I never liked the first Stalker, but a lot of my friends did because it's very reminiscent to Romanian architecture. So let's take a look-see. Maybe this is how America is going to look like in a couple of years, eh? think like Stalker, the reason I never got into it is that it was a game ahead of its time. It was open world. It did no handhelding. You could just do whatever you wanted to do. And at the time, those games weren't a thing. And I literally didn't know how to play Stalker. And it didn't handheld you like today. Like, there were no arrows telling you where to go. You had to actually read the text. And the text said, it's like, oh, there's a river to the west. You need to cross the river and go past. I take it you'll be able to use vehicles in this one?
Last question, Dr.
Oh yeah, the US infrastructure is already at this level. Oh, don't worry about it. They passed the infrastructure bill.
Dallin, are you sure the perimeter surrounding the zone is really enough? If a powerful emission were to occur, we would...
Listen, the zone has remained stable for years. Besides, we didn't establish the most advanced institution in human history without first guaranteeing its safety. As the head of the Scientific Institute for Research of the Chernobyl area, or CIRCA for short, I believe...
Oh, hey Mantat, welcome back.
I believe the wonders that we will bring to the world far outweigh the potential risks.
How big are these risks exactly?
The zone reveals a whole new world. We can stick with the old one, fearing change. But tell me, do you want our descendants to remember us as cowards? Or as those who dared to venture forward to a new, better humanity?
I really like the graphics. They look so freaking good. See, this is why I got a new graphics card, to see shit like this.
Were evacuated. I remind our listeners that a similar incident happened in our region quite recently, ruining homes and livelihoods.
You play as the soy boy?
However, City...
It's a good game, but it's Xbox. I think you can play it on PC. Like, they actually said on Xbox that all their consoles don't really matter. Like, you can play all their games on PC now.
Officials urge people to stay calm, assuring them the situation is totally...
Have I used my RTX? With what? There's no games for it. Like, there's no games that are demanding.
...under control. The game looks great. It's just that I wish I could have seen more gameplay. But if the weapons sound good, then that would be amazing. The internet is completely dead. That internet theory is true. 4chan is completely overrun. You should try 9gag. Unironically, 9gag actually has people that are against woke ideology. Of all the sites, I would not have expected 9gag to be the last bastion. Yeah, movie trailers are not the game. I think it had a little bit of in-game engine scenes shown, but oh, here we go. I found the Heart of Chernobyl thing. I guess like Stalker is supposed to be a little bit scary, but it's not a horror game. Holy shit, it looks so fucking good. Look at this, chat.
Ну, давай, малюй картину маслом.
Wow. Why can't Western games
be more like this. Does he have cheat modes on? Like everybody's fighting at him and no one hits?
Вот поэтому я ни в какие разборки и не лезу. Не хочу пулю поймать.
Ну, не знаю. Между аномалией и маслиной я уже лучше пулю выберу.
Oh, this is so cool. Chat, this is so freaking awesome. Why don't you tell me I'm facing the wrong way? Chikaplia.
Вот ты говоришь, а я прям вижу красоту эту. Не первый год в зоне, вроде примелькалась уже. А как...
It's possible they may have multiplayer in this. I mean, they haven't announced that it's single player only. But yeah, the previous Stalkers were single player. I think like multiplayer could actually work in a game like this.
Каждый день удивляет.
Зона
The new CCP, like what does CCP stands for?
надоесть не может.
That's an anomaly. It's not an invisible enemy. It's just like if you walk into certain areas, you can die, and they are invisible. But in order to detect them, you use that gadget and you throw bolts.
Говорят, ты знаешь, где вход в фундамент.
The NPCs are really great as well. My God, this game is so fucking beautiful. Yeah, 2-player campaign mode.
Узнаешь мотив? Слышал? Вот это культура.
The man
А
of
ты одно и
culture.
то же.
See, this is how you use memes. It's so interesting. Like, whenever you see Westerners trying to make memes in the game, they're usually very fucking cringe. But, like, this guy just casually dropping, like, he's a man of culture. That instantly makes you laugh.
По кругу лобаешь.
Сам же просишь. У меня музучилище, если что.
О, мессия, прошу прощения.
This game doesn't need booba. It's all about the vibe. Like, if you're going to show me, you know, Conan the Barbarian, where everything is exaggerated and over the top, yeah, I want to see the booba exaggerated and over the top. But in a game like this, you don't need to.
Может, вам к ученым? Профессура. Они вам лабораторию найдут.
How does this game look this fucking good? You know, I just realized this is a trailer and the actual game might not look this good.
Да пошел ты.
Mimics the monster.
Зря ты так с друзьями. Ты же его на вылазки таскаешь.
Чего-чего, а дружбы в зоне я точно не встречал.
Это верно.
Он мучился?
Нет.
Это хорошо. Он этого не заслужил.
А пулю заслужил. Жаль, что ты так с ним поступил.
Мне тоже. Считаешь, я не думал, как обойтись без его смерти? Она не могла быть свободна, пока он жил. Зато теперь посмотри на нее. Нет, Скиф, я не отдам ее никому. Зона дала мне жизнь, новую жизнь. Жизнь, которую я готов вернуть, если потребуется. Я буду защищать ее. Всегда.
Oh wow, you get massive. I really miss this. Like first-person shooters that have crazy weapons. Every single military shooter that came out just has normal basic bitch weapons. But every now and then you find the game that has something like this and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting.
Half-Life. You had so many cool weapons in Half-Life, like you had the snarks, like actual living creatures that you used as a weapon. Also, I noticed another thing about these games, right? Like, this guy is wearing a gas mask, but these other ones aren't. Like, why? Is the air toxic or not? Like, why is he wearing a gas mask? Just to add drama to the situation? Because there's people that wouldn't wear a normal cloth mask, like a surgical mask on top of their face, because it's uncomfortable. But sitting at the fire with the gas... Do you understand how uncomfortable this shit must be like? I guess the only explanation would be like if he doesn't want to show his face, right? Like if he wants to remain anonymous. Yes, I did play the Unreal series.
И куда ты теперь?
В Припять. Нужно с ним поговорить.
Удачной охоты, Stalker.
Yeah, no, this game is really great. When it's coming out? Next year? Oh! 28 April 2022? What the fuck? This can't be right. Oh, you can pre-order from 28 April 2022. It's just weird. Oh, no. I think I remember what happened. Okay, so this is from 2021. And they were planning to release it on 2022. But because of the war, they actually delayed it. So this is an old trailer. Ah, I see. I understand now. Naruhodo. Yeah, it's been delayed. Now I remember. Anyway, right. Thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate it. And hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. And I'll see you there. Take care.